Buy Sri Lanka's best internet package for online learning and online working with many amazing offers. Call 1212 for more information. Sri Lanka Telecom.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, freedom and crackdowns. As new ministers took up their posts today, Minister of Mass Media Keheliya Rambukwella promises an era of media freedom.
So that freedom effectively will be there.
While Justice Minister Ali Sabri promises to hunt down all Easter attackers. Harsh measures. Chinese aviation authorities slap 4-week ban on Sri Lankan Airlines flights to Shanghai after returning Chinese nationals test positive. Difficult choices. As new government begins work, national list deadline looms tomorrow as United National Party and Our Power of People Party still at sea over nominations. On the up, the rupee goes from strength to strength against the US dollar, reaching 182 rupees and 90 cents. All this and much more coming up on this Thursday, the 13th of August 2020.
නව sunlight sakura then දිකුකල් පවතින sakura මල් සුවඳින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando. Moving on to your top stories for tonight. Based on instructions issued by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa for ministers to take office and begin work as soon as possible, a number of cabinet and state ministers assumed duties at their relevant ministries today. Responding to media after taking office, Minister of Mass Media Keheliya Rambukwella insists that the freedom of the press should prevail and says that he believes that the media should not be controlled. Meanwhile, Minister of Justice, President's Counsel Ali Sabri issued a firm guarantee that all those connected to the Easter attacks will be brought to justice under his ministerial tenure. Following his appointment as the Minister of Trade, Dr. Bandula Gunawardena assumed duties at the ministry in Vauxhall Street, Colombo this morning. Minister of Mass Media Keheliya Rambukwella took office at the Ministry of Mass Media and Information in Narayanpeta this morning, where he stated that the hallmark of this new government will be increased media freedom.
You mentioned that you will expect him to reform state media to compete with private on the media. So do you have any basic plan how you going to do it? Because basically when we talk about state media, it's all about promoting government projects.
No, it is the responsibility of the state media to give the propaganda of the state activities. There's nothing wrong in it. How can you say it's wrong? If there's a project done by the government which the public has requested, then what happens? You do that project and let the people know that we have done the project. And perhaps if the private media is not carrying it out, it's the responsibility of the government media to give that propaganda. If you give false propaganda, then your question has a validity. The government machinery is there to expose whatever the government is doing. What I meant was by competition in the sense, not by control, by competition. You say controls, I don't believe in controls. We should not have any controls in the media. Government has to compete so that the government media will have a better credibility if they compete well. During my period, our financial positions were, we were able to even pay back the treasury. That kind of competitiveness is the most healthiest thing in the present marketing world. Even without the right to information, during my time, I think there was no hiding of information. We were able to give whatever the information necessary. So that freedom effectively will be there.
Meanwhile, Minister Pavitra Vanyarachi also assumed duties in a familiar role at the Ministry of Health in Maradana this morning. Professor G.L. Pires, who was appointed the new government's Minister of Education, took office at his ministry in Battaramulla this morning. The new Minister of Water Supply and Drainage, Vasudevana Nayakkara, too assumed duties at the ministry premises in Palavatta, Battaramulla. Meanwhile, Minister of Tourism Prasanna Ranatunga also took office at his ministry in Colombo. The new Minister of Labour, Nimal Siripala de Silva, too assumed duties at the Ministry of Labour in Narahempita. Minister of Highways Johnston Fernando broke away from tradition and assumed duties today by laying the foundation stone for the construction of a tunnel aimed at reducing traffic congestion in the city of Kurunegala. Further, the carpeting of a road in Kurunegala also commenced today with the participation of the minister. In the meantime, State Minister of Urban Development, Coast Conservation, Waste Disposal and Community Sanitisation Dr. Nalaka Gudeheva assumed duties at his ministry at Sitsiripaya, Battaramulla this morning. The State Minister of Women and Child Development, Preschool and Primary Education, School Infrastructure and School Services, P.L. Nishanta, also took office at his ministry at Sitsiripaya, Battaramulla. What's more, State Minister of Gem and Jewellery Industries Lohan Ratwatta assumed duties at his ministry in Narahempita this morning. Meanwhile, a ceremony was organised in Kandy yesterday to welcome President's Counsel Ali Sabri, who was sworn in as the Cabinet Minister of Justice.
ලංකාවේ අධිකරණ අමාත්‍යවරයා හැටියට දිරුදු. ඒ ඇවිල්ලා යම් සමාජයක් වෙනුවෙන් නෙමෙයි. යම් ජන කොට්ටාශයක් වෙනුවෙන් නෙමෙයි. මේ රට වෙනුවෙන්. අපිට මේ රටට විරුද්ධව එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ රටේ සාමයට විරුද්ධව අපි අබමාල රේණුවක තරම්වත් වරදක් අපෙන් සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන සහතිකය මුල් අවස්ථාවේදීම අපි මේ අවදාපා. මේ රටෙන් අපිට තරම් මුස්ලිම් සමාජය තුලින් අන්තවාදය ඉවත් කරන්න ඕනකමක් වෙන කාටවත් නැහැ. ඇයි ඒ? ඒ අන්තවාදීන් ඉන්න තාක්කල්, ඒ ත්‍රස්තවාදීන් ඉන්න තාක්කල් අපිට නිදහසේ ඉන්න බෑ. ඒ හින්දා කවුරු හරි පාස්කු පහරයට හෝ අන්තවාදයට හෝ සම්බන්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් ඒ අන්තිම පුද්ගලයා දක්වා නීති ඉදිරියට ගෙනල්ලා දඬුවම් කරන්න අපි උපරිමයෙන්ම කරනවා.
Enjoy a very smooth shave with the Bic Easy 2 razor. Bic Easy 2.
Secretaries for the 25 new cabinet ministries were appointed today. Accordingly, they received their letters of appointment from President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Presidential Secretariat.
Appointment letters to secretaries appointed to the 25 new cabinet ministries were handed over at the Presidential Secretariat today. Accordingly, WMDJ Fernando has been appointed Secretary to the Cabinet. SR Artikula retains his position as the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance. Dr. Anil Jasingha has been appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Environment, while Admiral Jainath Kolambage has been appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Relations. Retired Major General Sumedha Perera was appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Agriculture. Retired Major General Kamal Gunratna accepted his reappointment letter as Secretary to the Ministry of Defence. Dr. Priyad Bandhu Vikrama has been appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Water Supply, and Professor Kapila Perera accepted his letter of appointment as the Secretary to the Ministry of Education. R.W.R. Pemasiri has been appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Highways, while J.J. Ratnasiri accepted his letter of appointment as the Secretary to the Ministry of Public Services, Provincial Councils and Local Government. Jagat P. Vijayveera received his letter of appointment from the President as the Secretary to the Ministry of Mass Media. Ravindra Heva Vitarna was appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Plantations, while Anuradhisa Nayaka took charge as the Secretary to the Ministry of Irrigation. Meanwhile, W.A. Chulananda accepted his letter of appointment as the Secretary to the Ministry of Industries, with Vasanta Perera being appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Power. S. Hettiya Rachi has been appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Tourism. R.A.A.K. Ranavaka received his letter of appointment as the Secretary to the Ministry of Lands. In the meantime, Mapa Patirana was appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Labour today. Further, R.M.I. Ratnayaka was appointed Secretary to the Ministry of Fisheries, while M.K.B. Harishchandra received his letter of appointment as the Secretary to the Ministry of Wildlife and Forest Conservation. Meanwhile, the post of Secretary to the Ministry of Transport was handed to Monty Ranatunga. Also, J.M.B. Jayawardena was appointed as the Secretary to the Ministry of Trade, with Major General Sanjeeva Munusinghe accepting his appointment letter as the Secretary to the Ministry of Health. Anuradha Vijay Koon received his appointment letter from the President as the Secretary to the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. KDR Olga received her letter of appointment from the President as the Secretary to the Ministry of Energy, while Siri Nimal Perera was appointed Secretary to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. In the meantime, Secretary to the President Dr. P.B. Jasundara announced that no changes should be made in chairpersons and members of boards of directors appointed to public corporations, boards and statutory bodies. Informing all secretaries of ministries, Dr. Jayasundara says that any change in such positions can be made only by obtaining the explicit approval of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
The Civil Aviation Administration of China announced that it has slapped a 4-week suspension on Sri Lankan Airlines flights to Shanghai from 17th of August. The Chinese aviation regulator imposed the suspensions after passengers aboard flights from 3 international airlines to Shanghai tested positive for the COVID-19 virus.
China's aviation regulator has slapped suspensions for flights to Shanghai operated by 3 international airlines, Etihad Airways, China Eastern Airlines and Sri Lankan Airlines yesterday. The suspensions will affect Etihad Airways Abu Dhabi Shanghai flight, a China Eastern Airlines Manila Shanghai flight and a Sri Lankan Airlines Colombo Shanghai flight. The suspensions were slapped after several passengers tested positive for COVID-19 on recent flights. According to a statement posted yesterday on the website of the Civil Aviation Administration of China, 6 passengers had tested positive on an Etihad Airways EY862 flight on the 3rd of August, while there were 6 positive cases on a China Eastern Airlines MU212 flight on the 5th of August and 23 positive cases on a Sri Lankan Airlines UL866 flight on the 7th of August. The suspension of Etihad Airways and China Eastern Airlines flights will last for 1 week starting 17th August, while Sri Lankan Airlines will be suspended for 4 weeks. To further contain the spread of COVID-19, a reward and suspension mechanism was introduced by the CAAC on June 4th. According to the CAAC policy, if all inbound passengers on an airline test negative for the novel coronavirus for 3 weeks in a row, the operating airline will be allowed to increase its number of flights to 2 per week. If the number of passengers testing positive reaches 5, the airline's flights will be suspended for 1 week. The suspension will last for 4 weeks if the number of passengers testing positive reaches 10. The CAAC also said that airlines will not be allowed to transfer their original quotas for EY862, MU212 and UL866 to other routes.
The Seychelles Fisheries Authority reports that 7 Sri Lankan fishermen have been remanded by the country's Supreme Court on charges of illegal fishing in Seychelles waters. The vessel and crew were apprehended on the 16th of July by Coast Guard personnel with 6.9 tons of shark, which they believe were caught in the country's waters. The crew members have been remanded after a 14-day quarantine period at sea as investigations continue.
The Supreme Court of Seychelles has remanded 7 Sri Lankan crew members of a fishing vessel for 14 days on charges of illegal fishing. The Seychelles Fisheries Authority reported that a Coast Guard ship apprehended a Sri Lankan vessel with 6.9 tons of shark on board on the 16th of July, after which the vessel was instructed to divert to Port Victoria for further investigations, but no boarding operations could be conducted immediately. The crew and the vessel were then placed in mandatory 14-day quarantine due to COVID-19 regulations and supervised at sea by naval and fisheries personnel. Following the end of the quarantine period, the 7 crew members were produced in court on the 5th of August and remanded for further investigations. The Seychelles Fishing Authority says that a large number of sharks of varying species were found aboard the vessel at the time, which they suspect were caught in Seychelles waters. According to the Seychelles People's Defence Force, this is the 4th illegal fishing vessel intercepted by Seychelles Coast Guard this year, with the last one intercepted in April. The Seychelles Fisheries Authority says that incidents involving Sri Lankan flagged vessels have become more frequent during the southeast monsoon, when the seas are rough and petrels are fewer.
With the government's war on drugs and the underworld going full steam ahead, the police, aided by military intelligence officers, have continued to round up drug racketeers and underworld figures throughout the past 24 hours.
The Colombo Crimes Division discovered 8,000 packets of heroin during a sudden inspection conducted on a vehicle in Palanmatta Piliandala last night. The market value of the stock of heroin seized was estimated at 8 million rupees. Police officers were also able to seize 2 mobile phones, 28,500 rupees in cash and 5 ATM cards. A couple inside the vehicle were arrested and are to be produced before the Caspaver magistrate. In another development, officers of the Burala police station arrested a woman with 1,800 milligrams of heroin in her possession at Sinadupata Burala yesterday. Following interrogation, it was revealed that the suspect had been engaged in drug racketeering in collusion with prison inmates currently in remand custody. What's more, it was also revealed that transactions amounting to 6.1 million rupees had been made through her bank account in the past 6 months. The suspect is to be produced before the Maligakanda magistrate tomorrow. Elsewhere, 4 suspects engaged in extortion activities in the Navagamo area were arrested by police while they were in hiding in an empty house. Police also seized 7 swords, 2 locally manufactured hand grenades, and 3 grams of heroin in possession of the suspects. It was also revealed that the suspects were accomplices of the underworld figure Samayan, who was killed in the infamous prison bus shootout. The arrested suspects, aged 22, 24, 25 and 27, are to be produced before the Kaduwala magistrate. Meanwhile, 2 suspects were also arrested in the Modra Uyana housing complex with 15.9 grams of heroin along with a stock of foreign currency today. The suspects were taken into custody by the Grand Pass police based on a tip-off provided by Army intelligence personnel. In the meantime, another suspect was arrested by police at St. Sebastian Street in possession of 10 grams of heroin today.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. Following his swearing in as the Prime Minister for the 4th time, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa visited the sacred city of Anuradhapura, where he met with prelates of several important Buddhist temples and engaged in religious observances.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa arrived in Anuradhapura this morning and called on the chief incumbent of the Ruwanwali Mahasaya, Venerable Dr. Pallegama Hemarathanathera. Following this meeting, the Prime Minister then engaged in religious observances. The Premier then called on the chief incumbent of the Atamasthana Viharaya, Venerable Dr. Pallegama Sirinivasathera, and received blessings. Prime Minister Rajapaksa also visited the sacred Jayasri Mahabodhya, where he engaged in religious observances. The Premier next called on the chief incumbent of the Mirisavatiya Viharaya, Venerable Italavatranavave Jnanatilakathera. At his next stop, the Premier visited the Jayanti Viharaya and called on chief incumbent Venerable Nugatanne Panyanandathera. In the meantime, Deputy Chief Prelate of the Askiriya chapter, Venerable Vanduruwe Upalithera, stated that all ministers should serve the country no matter what their assigned ministerial positions are.
මේ සෞභාග්‍ය රටක් ගොඩනගා ගැනීම සඳහා රටේ ජනතාව විශ්වාසය තබලා තිබෙනවා. ඒ අනුව මේ රට සෞභාග්‍ය කරගෙන යෑමේ ඒ වගකීම ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඉටු කරයි කියන බලාපොරොත්තු අප කාතුලත් තිබෙනවා. ඒ නිසා ඇමතිවරු මේ අවස්ථාවේ කල්පනා කළ යුත්තේ ලැබුණු ඇමතිකම විෂයපතය කුමක් වුවත් සියලු ඇමතිවරුන්ට තිබෙන්නේ එක හා සමාන බලයක්. ඒ නිසා ඒ බලය යොදාගෙන මේ රට කිරීමේ වගකීම මේ ඇමතිවරුන්ට පැවරෙනවා.
With the Samagi Jana Balavega handing in their national list nominees to the Election Commission today, the United National Party and the Our Power of People Party are the only political parties yet to follow suit. Meanwhile, leader of the AdaDerana National Council, Venerable Athurali Ratanathera, says that he remains the only person with the power to nominate a national list candidate and that's the only way to resolve the party's current problem.
The Samagi Jana Balavega handed in its finalized list of national list nominations to the Elections Commission today. Samagi Jana Balavega General Secretary Ranjit Madhuma Bandara, National Organizer Tissa Attanayaka, Harin Fernando, Imtiaz Bakir Marker, Eran Vikramaratne, Mayantha Disanayaka and Diana Gamage have been nominated.
අපේ සියලුම පක්ෂවල අපේ මිත්‍ර පක්ෂවල අපේ සන්දානගත වෙලා ඉන්න පක්ෂවල ආශිර්වාදයේ කැමැත්ත ඇතුව සියලු දෙනාම ඒකමතිකව තීන්දුව කරා මේ 7 දෙනාව.
එතුමා දැන් මනෝගණේශන් මහත්මයා දිගින් දිගටම කිව්වා යාලට නියෝජනයක් ලබා දෙන්න කියලා. මෙතනදී ඇයි දෙමළ පක්ෂ වලට නියෝජනයක් නැත්තේ මේ
අපේ සන්දානගත පක්ෂ 4ක් හිටියා. ඒ 4ම කිව්වා අපි ලබලා දෙනවා නම් පක්ෂ 4ටම ලබලා දෙන්න ඕන. නැතිනම් මේ විදිහට කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා.
With the majority of all political parties having already handed in their national list nominees to the Elections Commission ahead of tomorrow's deadline, only the United National Party and the Our People of Power Party are yet to do so. Meanwhile, the Working Committee of the United National Party says it will make the final decision regarding its single national list nominee tomorrow. In the meantime, Vijayadharani National Council leader Venerable Athuraliye Ratanathera says that the power to nominate An OPPP candidate for the national list remains vested with him, according to the MOU signed at the party's inception.
ජාතික ලයිස්තු මන්ත්‍රී දුරය පත් කිරීමට නිර්දේශ කළ හැක්කේ මේ ගිවිසුමට අනුව අතුරුලී රතන හිමියන්ටම පමණයි. එතකොට මේකට අත්සන් කරලා තියෙන වේදිනිගම විමලතිස්ස ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ, පූජ්‍ය අතුරුලී රතන ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ මේ තියෙන අපේ අවබෝධතා ගිවිසුමේ ලියවිල්ල. මම ඥානසාර ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේත් එක්ක අවස්ථා 3-4ක් කතා කළා උන්වහන්සේ කිව්වා මේ පිරිස ඉල්ලා හිටින උන්වහන්සේ නිසා උන්වහන්සේට පත් වෙන්න ඕන කියලා. මම ඉල්ලන පිරිසකුත් ඉන්නවා. මං කිව්වා ඒ ගැන අපි දෙන්න අතර කිසිම ගැටුමක් අපි ඇති කරගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. දැන් සමන් පෙරේරාගේ නම සමන් පෙරේරා විසින්ම නම් කරලා අරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ තමයි පක්ෂයේ අයිතිකාරයා, පක්ෂයේ සභාපතිවරයා. පක්ෂයේ සභාපතිවරයාට කිසිම අයිතියක් නැහැ තමන්ම පත් වෙන්න. ඒක මම මුලින්ම කියනවා. මේක විසඳ ගන්න දැන් තියෙන එකම ක්‍රමය තමයි සාධාරණව සදාචාරාත්මකව නීතිමය ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයකින් අපි උත්තරය සොයා ගන්නවා. ඒ අනුව අධිකරණ ක්‍රියාවලියකට අනිවාර්යෙන් යන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. ඒ අනුව മന്ത്രിවරයා මාගේ නිර්දේශයකින් තොරව පත් කිරීමට කිසිම බලයක් කිසි කෙනෙකුට නැහැ. ඒ නීතිමය බලය අපි ඉස්සෙල්ලම පෙන්වන්න ඕන. මැතිවරණ කොමසාරිස්වරයාට. ඒ සඳහා අදාළ ලියුම් අපි මුලින්ම යවලා තියෙනවා.
දැන් ඒක පාර්ලිමේන්තු රැස්වෙන්න ඉස්සලා මේක විසඳුමක් ගන්න.
ඔව් ජාතික ලයිස්තු මන්ත්‍රී දුරේ අවුරුදු 3ක් ඇදී යන්න පුළුවන් වෙන අඩුව. අවුරුදු 5ම යන්නත් පුළුවන් ඒක. අනේ මේ මන්ත්‍රී දුරේ නොලැබුණා නම් කොච්චර හොඳද කියලා මට හිතෙනවා.
Meanwhile, the General Secretary of the Our People of Power Party, Venerable Vedinigama Vimalatissa Thera, says that the party's national list issue should be solved through the intervention of the President.
දැන් මම හිතන්නේ මේ කටයුත්තට ජනාධිපතිතුමා මැදිහත් වීම තමයි අතිශයින්ම කාලෝචිත.
The Campaign for Free and Fair Elections organization says that the post-election period following the recent general election has been violence-free. The organization's executive director Manas Makeen pointed out that observations made in the past week following the election have shown the post-election period to be peaceful. He added that while CAFE had received 39 complaints during the post-election period, none of them were considered to be serious incidents. The majority of the reports received, Makeen added, were reports of incidents such as motorcades in defiance of election laws. The CAFE executive director pointed out that the post-election period was peaceful as a result of programs launched by civil society organizations as well as strict implementation of election laws. The country's overall number of active COVID-19 cases was reported at 225, while the total number of COVID-19 recoveries rose to 2,646 after 8 patients were given the all-clear to return home today. This places the recovery percentage of the country at 91.84%. Meanwhile, one COVID-19 patient was confirmed yesterday and was identified as an Indian sea marshal who had travelled from Egypt. Despite no community-based transmissions being reported, health authorities continue to warn the public to stick with health and safety protocols as there still remains a threat of hitherto unidentified cases and clusters popping up. This warning comes as the community moves towards an increased level of normalcy with schools reopened and more civilian traffic reports in many towns and city centres. We'll return after this short commercial break. Stay tuned. Sri Lanka stocks closed 0.47% higher today and the old share price index gained 15.04 points to 5,235.61. The S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks gained 0.87% or 19.92 points to 2,297.10. Market turnover reached 1.9 billion rupees while 66 stocks made gains and 99 made losses. Here's a brief report on today's market performance.
The market was on an uptrend for the third consecutive day, with the ASPI gaining by about 15 points and the S&P SN20 gaining about 20 points. The overall market saw strong buying interest, with interest coming from high net worth individuals and local retailers, where the turnover was almost close to 2 billion rupees. We saw institutional buying also coming into the market, where the investor interest was mostly focused on the banking sector counters, similar to yesterday. In addition to that, If you take the banking sector across the board, strong buying interest emerged in these counters with the further decline in interest rates and results that are released. So with that, we are starting to see a strong upward movement in the market with strong buying interest emerging on fundamentally sound counters. Most investors are shifting into these blue chip counters with the earnings numbers getting released. If you take the foreign front, we are still seeing net foreign outflow, but lower number this time, only about 56 million rupees of outflows. However, interestingly, we have seen some foreign buying today on a number of counters.
The Sri Lankan rupee closed at 182 rupees and 90 cents to 183 rupees against the US dollar in the spot market today, while bond yields eased. Now let's have a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day today. And that's it from First at 9 for tonight. Good night.